Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Navigating Need Access. I'm Ann Barandetta, Internal Account Executive and Technical Lead for Need Access. With me today as panelists, I have Jim Misty, Need Analysis Expert and our longtime Need Access Consultant, Kim Sawarsky, National Sales Director, Amy Manfredi, Director of School Services, and Teresa Lawson, Internal Account Executive. Our goals for today are to provide you with an overview of the all-new Need Access School Administrator with a focus on the best ways to navigate around the system and how to get the most out of the new features. We'll also touch on some tips and tricks, time permitting. A couple quick housekeeping notes before we get started. You may have noticed that your phones are automatically set on mute, so if you have any questions, please send them through panelists using the chat feature built into the WebEx session. Depending on the type of question, we may go ahead and answer it via chat immediately, verbally when we take a break for questions, or by email after the session for topics that are more in-depth or very school-specific. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We have here the homepage for the School Administrator section of Need Access. Which is, we're not calling it the council anymore, but it's the new replacement for it. So let's go ahead and dive straight into a student applicant, and we'll take a look at their record and see what's the same, what's new, and what's gotten a facelift. Okay, so here we have our first student record. I'd like to start at the top and work our way down. You can see we have warning messages up here at the top that are similar to those in the old system. We've left them in a similar location and made them red font, so they'll jump right out at you. Here we have a note saying that this application has been resubmitted, and in this particular case, the non-custodial parent has indicated that they'd like their data to remain confidential. The next item that we have down here is called the ribbon, and it lists the critical information for each student's record. We have the student's name, social security number, important pieces of information and indicators. So you can either leave this ribbon open or you can actually collapse it a little bit to get it further out of your way. You may notice there are left and right arrows next to the ribbon. These arrows will allow you to navigate from student to student without going back out to the original search screen every time. Okay. The next ribbon down is our navigation ribbon, and you'll see we start out with the Need Analysis tab, which contains all of the Need Analysis pages, which are broken down here. They can also be navigated using these left and right buttons or by clicking on an individual page. For those of you who are longtime Need Access users, you'll note that the layout of this page is very similar, if not almost identical, to the old counselor. We've just given it a bit of an upgrade in appearance. So as always, the first few sections of the Need Analysis report summarize the data that the students and parents have provided to us, including income, any allowances against income, the particular pieces of data we collect that are unique to Need Access and not included in the federal methodology, like medical and dental expenses and home equity, are all summarized here. And then as we get a little further down to the bottom, you'll see the ESCs, again, broken into parent, federal, and Need Access, and then student, federal, and Need Access. At the bottom of the page, we have all of the EFCs summarized here, along with that for the non-custodial parent. And let's jump back up top here to the non-custodial parent report, where we have listed separately all of the non-custodial parent information and the breakdown of all of their EFCs. One thing I would like to call your attention to is at the bottom of the Need Analysis report, page 2, we have the messaging. And it's loading right now. There we are. So again, these are the same fields in the same order as in the old counselor, but then down here we do list all of the federal assumptions and Need Access messages. These summarize anything that's come up in the calculations that we want to call your attention to. Okay. The remaining pages in the Need Analysis section cover packaging and awarding, as well as student-level overrides, which we'll be covering in a later training session, but they are here in case you'd like to take a look at them. Something you'll notice that is new is this comment section, which is nestled right here in the student application. It allows you and any users in your office to make comments on a student record if there's something you want saved with the record or noted here. Okay, let's hop over to the application pages themselves, the pages that store the data provided by students, parents, and non-custodial parents. If you need to make any changes to the application, you can change them here, and they're saved as soon as you leave this page, or if you click the Save button located at the bottom of every page. As soon as you save a change, the needs analysis is automatically recalculated on the spot. In this section as well, you can navigate between pages either using these links or using the left and right arrows. Something we did want to point out to you that's a little different in this system is the help text that's available. For any of these fields, if you click on this orange question mark, you'll see that's a little small on my screen, so I'm going to make it just a little bigger very briefly. You'll see we have what we're calling the long name for this field, which we'll get back to in a little bit, the reference number, which is unchanged, the length of the field in case you need that for exporting or other uses, and then here we have the actual body of the question text that the student sees when they fill out the application. So if you have a student with questions about how to answer a particular field, you can open this to see the kinds of information they're getting and work from there. Okay, and you'll see there are question marks next to all of these application fields. This layout persists through the parent and the non-custodial parent form. And then we've collected all of the special circumstances under one tab this year. So you'll see there's student, parent, and non-custodial parent special circumstances all in one place. So you can click through them to see what the students and parents have said. We're going to skip over the Set Flex Fields tab for now, since we'll be covering that in a future training session. But you can note that it is here, and the Flex Fields are an update to the indicators that were used in the old system. So you'll see some familiar faces here like the active indicator. Let's jump ahead to application history, where we can also see the comments that I mentioned earlier, any comments attached to a field. And then we also have the audit trail, which summarizes every change to an application. Here you'll see Jim helped me this morning make a couple quick tweaks to this application, so the numbers looked a little more realistic from our original test data. But it tracks the username, the old value, the new value, the field that's been changed, and when it was done in case you have any questions. Okay. Let's head back and talk a little bit about the searches that are available under the new Need Access School Administrator section. You'll see up at the top most of the usual suspects. We have last name searches, social security number searches. One of the main searches we think will be most commonly used is the status search, and it lists here the 4 statuses available in the Need Access application. So the new status, of course, is an application that's been loaded into school administrators that has not been viewed or had any action taken on it by any user at the school. An application marked as viewed is, of course, one where any user at your university, your school, has viewed this application. Edited is, of course, indicates one where a change has been made to any data field by a school user. And exported indicates that a loaded application has been exported using one of the standard export file layouts by a school user. Since the exporting is generally only done by a school to take the data out of Need Access and send it off to a different system where processing is then completed, we consider exported to be a terminal status, which means that once an application goes to exported, even if you go back and make an edit to it afterwards, the status will stay exported. Another common search feature are these letters of the alphabet here. If you click on one of them, it will take you to a list of all last names starting with that letter. In this case, there are none starting with the letter S, but it would take you to just S letters, just the last name. I'd also like to call your attention to the display record here. You'll see the default is that we're displaying 25 records at a time, but you can adjust this to 50 or 100 records if you'd like to see more on a page at any given time. At the bottom, you have the choice of navigating between pages. If there are more than 10 pages, you'll see an ellipsis at the end and can continue all the way to the very end of your list. It looks like we're getting a question, so bear with me for just a moment. Sure. Okay, something to note here is that as you're working on an application list, you'll see here we currently have 78 student records in the search result. If an applicant is submitting on the web as we speak, that application will process through to you in under 10 minutes. So as you're working, you may see this number increase, and you may see students popping into your list. If you would prefer to work with a static list and not have real-time updates popping in as you're trying to go through a work list, you can use the end date search here to search on yesterday's date. So, for example, if we put in 1/30/2012 and search, that would prevent any applications submitted today from popping into the middle as we were trying to work. So let's talk a little bit about the date search since we're here. Something that's a little different that we did for this year is the date search will pull up, let's say we did a search to look for everybody who submitted within the last week. The 23rd to the 30th would give us a week's range of application submissions. Now, the search date will pull the original submission date for any student's application as well as the resubmission date. We'll talk about resubmissions here in a little bit, but I wanted to make sure I called your attention to that as well. Okay, let's go ahead and clear our search results, and then I'd like to take a look at some advanced search criteria. You'll see down here we have a More Options link, which takes us into the advanced search functionality, and we can combine this with a basic search above. So let's say we were looking for a student who, or all students of our applicant pool who were first-year graduate students who had answered a particular custom question a certain way. So we can go into that More Options and open this field picker or the data selection tool, which gives us every field in the application, both questions that students and parents have answered, as well as the need analysis calculated values, some basic application management data fields like submission date, that kind of thing, and flex fields. So let's take a look at the application. You'll see we have general application information. I'm going to go into the student tab here, and it lists all of the fields that the student entered on the application. Let's say I have a particular custom question in mind. I can type a portion of the name or the custom question number up at the top, and then it'll give me the results that match that search. So here I can look for any students who said that they're interested in public health. This list of conditions is contingent on the field that you've chosen, and you'll note that it does change depending on what type of field you've selected as your search field here. In this case, I'm going to ask for anyone who answered that custom question with an answer that's equal to yes. This value field, in this case, represents the drop-down list that was that the students saw when they filled out this question. So I'm going to ask for yes. And when I hit search, I don't have any results, but if I expand the year in school back up to everyone, you'll see I have 4 results. So these 4 students all answered the question about whether they were interested in public health as yes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and clear those search results and show you an example of a compound advanced search. You may have noticed off here at the right there's an and or box, so we can actually string several of these lines together. So let's say we wanted to look for a student where an expected contribution was over above a certain level who lived in a particular state. So we could start that out by just typing expected contribution. or some portion of it, and you'll see it gives us all of the options. So in this case, we have the field picker here, or the tree, which tells us that under the need analysis options for students, the need access methodology, or the IM, we have an expected contribution from students. We could also pick the federal methodology or parents, and the list goes on. But I'd like to start with this one. And we'll look for an EFC that's less than or equal to $8,000. And we'll look for student's mailing address. Actually, so we'll just go straight to state. And you'll see, now this is the need analysis tree, so I don't want that. But I'm going to jump down to the application tree, student, and then mailing address. We'll ask for that to be equal to, and then go for the state of Delaware, and then we'll search. And you'll see we have 3 results listed here below. Now, let's say that was a search that I wanted to use frequently, and I thought the results were very helpful. I could actually save that search by clicking this Save Search button right down here underneath the search link, and it brings up a Save Search box. Now, I can name this whatever I'd like, and it'll be automatically appended with 1213 to indicate that I saved it during the 1213 processing year. So I'll call it something very simple, state and EFC. Now, I can ask that the search be limited only to me so that no one else in my office can see it, or I can leave that box unchecked, which is the default, which means everyone else with access to my school will be able to see and use that search, but not save or change or delete it. So I'll go ahead and save. And you'll see that the search appeared up here in the drop-down list where all of our saved searches are located. So I could pick any one of these and run the search at any time, saving you a little bit of time and efficiency. Okay. Once you've completed your search and run through a list of results, you can actually minimize the search box to give yourself a little more room to work. That gets it out of your way so you can focus in on your students once you've narrowed down your list. Yes, that's exactly where I'm headed. All right, as Jim pointed out, the next logical place to look are these sort fields off to the right. You'll see that we have sort field 1 and sort field 2, and they both have a little plus sign in them. If you click on the plus sign, that takes us back into that same field picker, where again you can pick any field in the application and list it right on this display grid. So let's say we also wanted to look at the, actually let's change it up slightly and say we wanted to look at the expected contribution total from students and parents. So again, I can either open these nodes on the field picker and search for it manually, or if I'm fairly confident I know exactly what the name is or the number, if it's a numbered question, I can type it up here at the top and search. And when I scroll down, I'll find the number I'm looking for. So in this case, I'd like the need access methodology, expected contribution total, student, parent, and non-custodial parent. So when I select that, I'll see that it populates right here in the sort field column. Now, it already happens to be sorted in ascending, but if I wanted to change that sort, I could click on the header of this field. First click sorts it ascending, as you can see from this tiny little arrow here. If I click again, it flips the sort order, and indicated by the arrow flipping as well. Any of the fields in the search can be clicked to be sorted, any of these underlined fields. So let's say I wanted to search on the submission date, the loaded application submission date, I could click here. If I wanted to search on the first name in alphabetical order, I could click that as well. I didn't mention this earlier, but of course this is a demo system with test data, so you'll see the names are not terribly realistic, so disregard those, of course. Okay, I'm actually going to re-expand the search options so I can go back in and clear my search results and get back to my full list of 78 students. And you'll see that clearing my search results also cleared my sort field. So those results are now gone, and I would need to add them again. Okay, I'm going to click on the resubmitted column here, and you'll see it automatically sorts ascending. So I'm going to click it again to flip it, and it'll bring the columns, the students with a date in this column up to the top. Now, this date represents a student who is originally submitted, in this case on 10/27, who's gone back out to the website and made some changes and resubmitted their NEED Access application. You'll see all of these examples happened yesterday as we were getting ready for this webinar. As you may recall from registration, when you registered for NEED Access for this year, we asked you to let us know when and how you would like us to handle resubmitted applications. The default was for any applications in a new or viewed status to allow resubmissions to automatically load into the system. So without you having to see them or do anything, those applications would automatically come in and load. For any students with a status of edited or exported, they did not automatically load, and that's, again, the default setting that may have been changed when you registered. But instead, you're prompted to note that these students have resubmitted, and you can decide if you would like to load them or not. The way you would decide if you wanted to load them would be to take a look at this View Diff link here that's next to every resubmitted student. I'm going to go ahead and click it, and it does open as a pop-up window. So as you'll see here, Firefox or Internet Explorer or any browser you're using may give you a white bar at the top of the screen saying a pop-up has been blocked. You can normally right-click on it or left-click, depending on how you're set up, to say that you'd like to allow pop-ups or that it's okay to download the file. Let's try that again. There we are. I'm going to go ahead and open it using Adobe because it's a PDF file. And you'll see here that this window summarizes the existing version of the NEED Access application that I have loaded, and then in the new version, the information that's been changed. Looking at this, I might decide that the information that's been changed is non-essential and there's no benefit for me loading it. Or I may say, oh, you know, I really want this particular piece of data and I ought to load this resubmission. After I make that decision, let me just close this. All right. After the decision's made on whether to load it or not, you can come back here and click this Load button. Please note, again, you'll see the original submission date for this record is 10/27, and the resubmission here is 1/30. So once I click Load, it asks me to confirm. And then we'll see the record in question has dropped away. Hang on one second. Hang on, I'm just finding him now. Okay. Well, at any rate, if we were to find him, we would note that his loaded app submission date had changed to 1/30/2012 because the date of the application we had loaded was now 1/30 instead of the original 10/27 submission.
I have a question.
Yes.
One of our guests is asking, does the new record overlay the old record, and can we lock the old record or the original record?
Yes, when you load the new record, it replaces the old record, including any changes you may have made to the record, whether that's packaging, whether that's changing one of the fields because the student or parent contacted you with their correction. But yes, loading the new record does completely wipe out what you've had before. That said, the way that you would control that loading process and lock any underlying records would be to not allow automatic resubmissions at any time, which can be done through registration. You can contact us to change your registration if you would like that to be updated. And so once you've prevented the applications from automatically overloading it, then you can also prevent them from manually overloading it by not clicking the load link. And that way your original records will always be maintained unless you choose to make a change to them. That is a change from the counselor in the past where we did have a locking feature. The locking feature in the old counselor was done on a record-by-record basis and was the only way to prevent resubmissions from automatically loading over your records. So in the new system, we've got a few more nuances in how we control that. Okay, are there any other questions before we continue? All right, what I'd like to show you now is how you could go about batch loading all of your resubmissions. Let's say you didn't want to look at the individual student records. You decided that they were all fine. You hadn't started packaging or processing yet, and you just wanted to load everybody no matter what. The best way to do that is to first clear any previous search results you've had, and then come up here to our More Options Advanced Search. We're going to open the field picker again, and you may remember I mentioned earlier that we have at our disposal all kinds of different fields to choose from, including general application information. You'll see here we can search on anything you can think of: statuses, edited by, the name of the school if you're at a school that has a couple different branches, like a nursing program and a medical program. But what I'd like to look for here now is the resubmitted date. So what I'd like to do is identify any application that has a resubmitted date for this year. So I'm going to ask for the resubmitted date to show me anybody, let's see, greater than the beginning of the processing year. So in this case, I'll choose 1/1/2012. And when I search, it should bring up our 4 records that still have a resubmission that we have not yet loaded. So now in order to, remember, if I wanted to individually load, I could click on the View Differences or Load here one by one, but let's say I had a list of 30, that's not less practical. So what I might choose to do instead would be to come to this Manage Students List link here on the upper right-hand corner. You'll see we have our 4 student records here. I could check all of them and then indicate that I'd like to load them. In this case, I'm only going to go ahead and load one. Go with Kilo Baker. So I've checked his box to indicate that I'd like to load him. And I'm going to click Load Selected Application. I get the same confirmation message. I'll go ahead and click Yes. And when we come back out to the main screen, you'll actually see he's disappeared. We only have 3 results now because he no longer meets my search criteria. Let's take a closer look at that Manage Students List. This is one of several options we have. That's what we call a batch functionality. It affects all of the students who are on the search list at the time I click into it. Actually, let's duck back out to the search list to re-emphasize that because it's important. Any results here are affected by any of these batch functionalities. So if I wanted to affect all of the students, I would clear the search results and then go back into the batch functionality. Okay, so Manage Students List. The Manage Students List allows us to make a change and apply it to multiple records at the same time, rather than having to go into each student and make changes. One of the most common ways this will be used is for batch loading of resubmissions, as we just talked about. Another very common feature is an active-inactive indicator. So you'll see over here we actually have that marked. There are a few schools who use that to indicate whether a student's been admitted or not, whether they've started the financial aid process, that kind of thing. So let's say I wanted to switch these 3 students from inactive to active. I would check their boxes, scroll to the bottom of the page, and choose the Set Active Inactive button. You'll see here I have a little drop down. I'd like to set them to active, so I'll select that and then hit Save and Close. And then you'll see all 3 of them are now marked active. Let's actually duck back out to the main list, and I can show you there's an active-inactive column right on the main screen where I can track that and sort by it as well. Okay. So that's 2 of the 3 main features that you can use under the Manage Students List: active-inactive and batch loading. The third option is setting flex fields. We'll talk a little in more detail about creating flex fields, setting them, the different ways they can be used in a subsequent training session. But for those of you who are familiar with what we called indicators in the old system, I wanted to show you that these were here. So let's continue to pick on our top 3 students. You'll see this is loaded automatically sorted by last name, though I can click any of these column headers to sort accordingly. And if we scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the Load Selected Applications link is grayed out since it doesn't apply to any of our 3 students. Here's Set Inactive, Active, which we just talked about. And what we'd like to do now is to go into Set Flex Fields. Hidden means that you'd like to block a student from view and that you do not want to see them again. Let's say you have a student who you know will definitely not be admitted to the university, or someone who's contacted you to say they're not interested in attending. You might hide them so that they fall off your list. So you can see here, hidden would be yes. Most of these other flex fields are options that we've chosen to set as examples of how you could use a flex field. Let's say you have a large office and you assign people alphabetically by last name or by date of admission. You could come in here and assign the counselor based on the date. So in that case, I would check a box over here to add my new flex field to the record and save and close. Again, I get a confirmation message where I'd say yes. Okay, so let's say that's all I wanted to do in here for the day. I can do one of two things, either come back up here to this previous link or go straight back to the Applications tab, and that will take us back out to our main screen. Okay. Moving on to our next batch functionality option, let's talk a little bit about printing.
Just one thing. When we loaded that resubmitted application, do you want to jump in real quickly just to show the within a student the Manage Applications function that shows that we could go back and retrieve the original data if we needed to?
That's a good idea. Okay, so the student we loaded was Kilo Baker. There he is. Okay, you may have noticed as I clicked by very quickly that his status had switched to new. This is the student for whom we loaded a resubmitted application. So as soon as the new application is loaded, the status flips to new since it has not yet been viewed, edited, or exported. Since I've clicked into it, it's now flipped over to viewed. And what we would like to show you is under the application history, you'll see here that we support application versioning this year. So let's say someone in my office loaded his resubmission, and I would really like to go back to the original data the student submitted on 10/27. I really didn't want this 131 to be loaded. I can go ahead and click this load link, and that will allow me to revert back to the original data the student submitted. And you'll see the status has switched back to new. So I can toggle now. So now that application is the most recent one that's loaded, you'll see number 2 has dropped down here, and now it has a load link. Again, this versioning works when a student has resubmitted an application. You'll see all of the resubmits listed here, and you can switch between them as you like. We can also go in here to the audit trail to see that the user, in this case the student, it tracks the changes here that were made between the two versions. So if I had any questions on what was in the old version or what was in the new version, especially if I had the student's record set up to auto-load, I could come in here to confirm and track those changes. Oh, here's another very good example. If you can see next to special circumstances, there's a little yellow icon. I don't know how small it is on your screens. It's fairly small on mine, but it looks almost like a 0 with a slash through it. That field indicates that I, as a school, have said that I would accept special circumstances, but this student has not provided any. In many cases, you'll see that next to the non-custodial parent form. When that doesn't apply, perhaps even the parent form, and that lets you know there's no reason to even bother clicking into that tab because there's no data there. See, nothing. Okay, I'll use this link up here to get back out to the applicants list. Again, I can also use applications up here. There we are. Okay. Are there any other questions on that functionality before we press on to printing and exporting? All right. That's good. And again, just to reiterate, if you have any questions, we won't hear you if you say them, but please go ahead and type them to Jim, or you can always get in touch with us after the training session. Okay. Actually, what I'd like to do is to search just on Kilo Baker's last name, but I think it has 2 spaces in it. So let me see if I can get, no. Okay, well, we'll work with this list of students. We have 19 students listed here. And I'd like to go ahead and show you the print options. Again, printing is a batch function which will affect my search list here that I have to the bottom of the screen. Remember, I have 78 students available total, but this functionality, any of these batch functions will only affect the number of students I have in my search results at the time I click the link. So when I go ahead and click print here, it's going to affect these 19 students. Okay, here are our printing and reporting options that are available. The student search results report will print this search grid that we have below. So it would give us the name, the social, any sort fields we've listed, the active-inactive indicator. It'll give us an Excel grid of all of our search results with any other data we have listed in it. Something you'll note here at the bottom is that the default option for any of these reports that came up when we opened the print options is to mask the first 5 digits of the Social Security number. So by default, we will not print anything for you that has the full social on it unless you choose to uncheck this box and print it that way. So let's go ahead and generate that report. Again, I get a confirmation message, and I'll click continue. Okay, now we get a note here saying that the report is being created and may take several minutes to complete. So we'll go ahead and let that work in the background there for a minute since I picked a larger block of students. And I'm here on a test database, which means that everything will run quite a bit slower than it will in production, because we have a teeny tiny little server running the test database. Okay, while that's running, let's take a look at our next batch functionality, which is export. You'll see the export link is listed down here. And if we click on export, we get the export pop-up box, which gives us the standard and custom export file layout options. Let's take a look first at the export standard XML file, which is our most commonly used standard export file. It's used by students to export need access data into external third-party systems like Banner, PeopleSoft, any of your FAM systems. The format of the file, as I said, is XML, which means that every data item in the file is tagged with the name of that individual file. So, for example, the first name, let's say Anne, is preceded by a tag that says first name, and then followed by a tag that says close first name. So any third-party system knows exactly how to process each individual data field, and it makes it easy to process the data accordingly. The export standard data is a slightly older file format, and that is a flat file that's still used by some schools with internal financial aid management systems that still prefer these types of data formats. The next 2 standard file formats are related to Payment Planner, which is a particular third-party product used by some of our schools. If you're not familiar with it, you won't need them. And then down here at the bottom, we have our custom export layouts, which are file layouts or reporting layouts that schools can create for their own use, and we'll talk about that in more detail in a subsequent training session. But any that you as a school user create will stack up down here at the bottom and can be selected. Now, something very important that I'd like to note is at the beginning of the session, I told you that anytime you export a file, the status switches to exported, and that is a terminal status. We talked about that. But what I'd like to note here is that to have a record change to an exported status, you'll need to export it in one of the standard export layouts. Because the custom export layouts are also a reporting function, we chose to set it up in a way that so that way you can do a very quick one-off report. Let's say you have a scholarship meeting and you need to take a list of all of your students who said they're interested in public health with an EFC below a certain level. You can run off a quick report here, dump it into Excel, take it with you to your meeting, but that way you're not marking all of those students as exported and affecting your processing. So again, just to recap, standard export layout. Any students that you export using a standard export layout will have their status flipped to exported. Any students that you export using a custom export layout or a reporting piece down here at the bottom will not have their status switched to exported. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and export our custom file layout, which we created. I'm going to go ahead and open it up with Microsoft Excel. Okay, now because the file is a CSV and I'm opening it in Excel with the default file format of XLS, I have to say that yes, it's okay that it doesn't match. And in this case, it's actually separated by commas. Normally, it drops into the individual Excel screen, so I'll have to take a look at that. It must have something to do with the settings on this particular Excel. But you'll see it exported some basic pieces of file data that we chose from that file, including first name, last name, email address, date of birth, and state of residence. Okay. Let's go back into export, and we'll take a quick look at a standard data file. There we are. And again, this is a standard file layout that you would normally export to your system. So obviously this is not something that a person would want to read, but the way the standard file layouts work is at certain intervals, certain pieces of data are always listed. So you can see buried in there, we do have some pieces we can read, like names and addresses. But okay. Unfortunately, it looks like our print option is still hung up because we are on the test server. When it's complete, we would see a note here saying your report has been generated. It would give me the date and time that it had been completed, and I would have a little oval here saying that I could click there to download the report.
Let's take a minute while that printing thing is still working. It's probably worth just backing up a bit and talking about the application life cycle, if you will. You know, some of the terminology we're using, like loading the application, whatever, it's a little different than what we've done in the past. And it may bear going over again what happens when the student files their application, they hit the submit button, it gets into the system, and then it comes to the system automatically. There's no more need for a school to go and ask for the data and ask for a mailbox to be downloaded. That whole process has been automated, and you just made it so much simpler. Do you want to talk to that some, or would you like me to? Or
go ahead.
Okay. Let me back over that again just for a second. We made a major change to the system where in the past within the Access Group offices, we kept a master database of all the student applications, and then we would prepare mailboxes that the schools would come into on our website, and they would say, you know, give me the latest mailbox with all of my applications. Then you would go to the counselor and load that mailbox into the counselor. So that whole process has gotten simplified tremendously, whereas now what happens is the student submits their application, they fill out all the data, they hit the submit button on the application, and within a few minutes, as Ann mentioned earlier, in a few minutes that application will show up in this list so that you see them, you see their applications within just a few minutes after they filed them. So for original submissions, the school no longer has to do anything in order to get the applications into their system so they can see them. So when you go out and you search for look for your applications, search by year in school or by date or whatever, all the applications that have been submitted with up to the last few minutes are there for you to find without you having to do anything differently. Now the one subtlety that Ann spent some time on is the resubmissions. It can be that a student decides, well, maybe they filed their application early and they only had estimated tax data, and they want to file a resubmission with their actual tax data. So that might be one reason that they would resubmit an application. Or it could be they submitted the application without the parents' data. That happens, more often than any of us care to think about. And and the school says, well, that's all well and good, but if you really want to be considered for a scholarship, you're going to give us the parents' data. So the student might go back in and resubmit for that purpose. So as Ann mentioned, when there's a resubmission, for the most part, those will, it depends on what you've done to the data as to whether or not that resubmitted data will load automatically or not. It will load automatically if you have indicated you want it to load automatically based on the status that the current application is in. If you haven't looked at the original submission at all, it's in a new status, odds are that the resubmitted application will just load on top of it, and you won't have to worry about it. If you've edited it, though, or exported it, you probably want to review that application before you load it, before you load the resubmitted application. So, so as Ann was showing, you may want to go through and look at those, see what changed in the application, and decide for yourself whether or not to load the new data. The classic case there, obviously, is the besides those we just talked about for the parents' data or the income data, is let's say a school has already handled their awarding process, and they've made awards to the student. Well, it could be that once you've gotten to that point in your processing cycle, you don't want to load resubmitted applications again. You want to keep the application looking just as it did when you made the award process, when you finished that. So the loading of resubmitted data is totally under your control, and you can either load the applications or not. You have the facilities that Andrew was pointing out to see what's different between the resubmitted application and what you have in the system. One of the ways to think about it is that we have what you're seeing in the system when you click on a student's name. I like to call it the currently loaded application. So there's always the official application, and if you do an export or if you do a printout or if you do something like that, you're going to be looking at the currently loaded application, which will either be the original submission or it'll be the resubmitted application if you loaded it into the system. So I'm going to leave there and let Ann get back on her track.
Wonderful. And you may have noticed I turned my screen sharing off. I figured having broken one test database, I would move on to another one. So you'll see here I have a different test database with some also junk data. But you can see I went ahead and printed a single student here, and it's now telling me that the last print job was generated today at 1:22 in the afternoon, and I can click here, which the time's about half an hour off on that, but we'll ignore that. And then I have a button here where I can click there to download the report. So if I click on it, again, we'll go through the Well, and that's the problem with playing in untested test databases. But generally, were I to click this download report button, it would bring up the Excel file, and I would be able to go through that print report. Let's take a quick look at the other print options. Please note here that you can have one result at a time. So when I click up the print options, it warns me that printing a new report will delete the report that I just generated a few minutes ago. Okay, and you'll see here the student search results report, which we talked about before. That produces a grid of the search results in Excel. So it shows you what you searched. It gives you your search criteria at the top in case you've forgotten what you used to come up with that list of students. Okay, and then we have a block of results that are all application data. So the first one is just the need analysis report. So those are the need analysis numbers for an individual applicant. And remember, this affects anyone in your search results because this is a batch functionality. So in this case, I only had one student in my search results, so she's the only one who would be printing. If I had an entire week's worth of students listed there, that's who would be printing, or everyone. So again, need analysis report. The core application data is the data keyed by students, parents, and non-custodial parents that is directly involved in the need analysis calculation. So it's just the basic numbers. The all application data is everything keyed in by the students and parents. Now this is a very long report and may not be something that you would want to batch print for large groups of students all at the same time because it will take a little bit longer to generate, but it is every field keyed in by students and parents. please note that you can only pick core application data or all application data because the core is contained within all, so it doesn't make sense to print both of them. So we've structured that for you a little bit there. The final option under this header is the audit trail report. Remember we looked at that before where it summarizes for you any fields that have changed, who changed them, whether it's the student, a school user, if so the username, lets you know the old data, the new data, old value, new value, all of that. The fund summary reports were in the old system and continue to be available here. We'll be covering them in more detail in a subsequent training session. And again, we touched on this briefly before, but the default is to mask the first 5 digits of the social. Okay, so that summarizes our batch functionality. Again, down here we have print options, manage students list, and export. Package applicants is also a batch functionality, but that's to be held for a subsequent training session. But these 4 options here are the batch pieces. And that's everything I had in mind to cover for those. So I'm asking Jim to check and see if there are any new questions.
Do you think we talked about the flex fields for a moment. Do you think you might be able to look into an individual applicant and show how we can set a flex field just for one person by using the set flex fields button?
Yeah.
Or the option there. And then I don't know whether you want to deal with it, but do you want to create a new flex field just to show how that works?
My list.
Great.
Time remaining.
Okay.
Setup tab and touch on that. Okay. So let's go back to our original test database, and we'll go into a student's record. As Jim mentioned, one of the areas where you can set flex fields, remember it's a batch functionality that you can do from the home screen. It's also an individual functionality that you can do from within a student's record by clicking on the Set Flex Fields tab. Let's say I wanted to mark this student as admitted and indicate that he was making satisfactory academic progress. These are just 2 examples of some flex fields that we created in the past. And remember, previously I assigned him to a particular counselor in my office named John. Remember, I can save any changes I make on an individual student record either by clicking into a different screen. It automatically saves for me and recalculates. So if we go back in, you'll see those changes have been saved. I can also save it by clicking the Save and Exit button down in the lower right-hand corner. And let's take a quick look at how we would change or create new flex fields. Again, we called them indicators in the old system, but we've updated the name to be flex fields because they're a little more flexible in the new system. You have more options. So I've gone into the Setup tab. Across the top, note we've got the Applications tab, which we've gone through in quite some detail. The Registration tab, which is the content will look similar, but the location has changed. All of you went through this registration process back in the autumn. But from now on, it'll be all in one place under one convenient login. And then under the Setup tab, we're actually going to skip ahead to this Flex Fields library and talk about that briefly. So you can see here we have the 3 flex fields we created for demonstration purposes under our Need Access University. So let's say I wanted to create a new one. What would a good flex field be?
Dual degree status.
Perfect. Okay, Jim suggested dual degree status. Now, I have some options here for what kind of data I want listed under my, what I want this to be. I could have it be a single field text box where, let's say I made it 1 character long. I could choose to answer Y or N would be, yes, they're a dual degree student, or no, they're not. I could choose to make it a flag. That would give me that drop-down list we saw in several of the examples with a yes or a no. But let's say what I really wanted to do was type in the name of the student's program, like JD MBA. What I would want to do then would be to make it a text box and count up the most number of characters I could possibly need and include that here. So let's say I had a master's in public health with a concentration in third world countries. So let's say 9 characters would be the abbreviation for that. I could set that here. And now my new flex field, dual degree status, would exist for all of my students. So let's say I wanted to go back into our student in question, or really any student. I'd go back to the Set Flex Fields tab, and again, this is to set it at the individual level, and I've got my dual degree status box. What did I say? Master's in Public Health with the concentration in, anyway, whatever the abbreviation is for the program in question, you could assign that here, and then save and exit. Now again, you can also assign them from your Managed Students list. Now remember, I'm at my full 78 student complement. I did not have any search criteria on there. So I can go through and let's say I have a list in one hand of my admitted students and then this in the other hand. So I could go through and say yes, yes, yes. You know, clicking through the list of students who qualified for a particular, who were admitted to a particular program. And I could set my flex field and go to dual degree status and type in anything I'd like there, as long as it was less than 9 characters. Remember, I have to check this box to the right under the Apply column to assign this to students. Okay, yes at my confirmation box. And then I'll pop back out to my Managed Students list. And then I can go ahead and add my new flex field under one of my sort columns. So it's a flex field. It's dual degree status. And if I select it, it will populate this right-hand column with everyone I've assigned. Again, I can click any of these column headers to sort ascending or descending. And there we have everyone that I've assigned to this program. I can also create it as an advanced search up here. I can again open our field picker, go back to flex fields, dual degree status, and select. So again, that was more options, search field. Now, let's say I wanted to find everybody who was in the JD MBA program that I just created. Or I could even shorten it from there and just say, give me everybody with the letter J in their results. And search for it. Oh, equals. How about contains? Everybody who contains the letter J. And there I have my results. So let's head back to the Setup tab again, across this top-level navigation that we touched on briefly. The very first tab under Setup has the, do you have a question?
Just one quick, just for a second. I'm not sure, there might be one or two people who are on the phone and can hear you, but we're not necessarily seeing what we're doing. So there was one question that came up. I tried chatting back and got a note. Anyway. Just to clarify, I'm sure most of the folks who are on the phone are aware that the system is live now. It's been live since January 9th, but just in case they don't know, they will have received their login credentials, and that's actually what you're going into right now. And they can log in right now today as soon as our session is over and look and see their students and start working with them.
Yep.
So what Ann is showing you is live. It's ready to go. And actually, you know, a fair number of our users have started using the system. In fact, some of them started using it on January 9th. They sneak in quickly and start using it before we even hear about it.
So the way we handled it this year was to assign the primary user at each school access rights. So on January 9th, the primary user at each school should have gotten an email with a username, typical convention is first initial, last name, and a temporary password. Then they're able to come and log in for the first time. This year, because there are some additional complexities, which I'll show you here in a second, in setting up users at a university, we asked the primary user at each university to set up their staff. Since there are access rights and roles, again, we'll touch on them in a minute, we didn't want to set them up here not knowing how you broke out tasks and responsibilities in your individual offices. The other reason we didn't want to set them up all here is that when users are set up in this new system, they require 2 points of authenticity. The first one is an email, and again, as I mentioned, that comes out with a username and a temporary password. But the second point of authenticity, which can't come out through email, because then it would be through the same channel, are these security questions. So as many of you know who are primary users, when we first set everyone up, we had a standard question, a standard security question that we used for everyone, and that was, what was your high school mascot? And we had special instructions to gain the answer either by calling us or by logging into eAccess to find the answer using the old system. That way we knew you were who you said you were and your email hadn't gotten hacked. So if you are a primary user or any other user at a school and you had a temporary security question that we or someone in your office set up for you that you'd like to change, this is where you would come in to do it. Again, we're on the Setup tab. The first tab that loads is My Profile. You'll see all of the basic contact information, your security image if for some reason you ever wanted to change it, and then your security answers down at the bottom that can be changed at any time. If you're the primary user at a school and you did not get your login information on January 9th, or if you'd just like us to resend it again, please contact any one of us here in the Internal Account Executive Office, and we'll be happy to generate that back out for you. Okay. The next tab over is called the User Setup tab, and I'd like to just take a quick look at the screen. I'm not actually going to run through creating a user, but we'll talk about the different boxes. Do we have a question?
I'm going to go to a button that's right there, but we haven't clicked on yet. At the top right, the Help button.
That's on my list.
No, somebody asked, do we have a user manual yet? so that was going to be the quick way to say, almost, and that's where it'll be.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. You may notice up here at the top, I mentioned the top-level navigation and said we've got applications, registration, and setup. We also have a Help tab over here to the right, which when I click on it will open in a new window. You can see this currently has our data dictionary, which I'll get back to in a minute. And this is where the school user manual will be when it's done. And that will be this week.
It's been written, I believe it's been 99% approved. It should be ready within a day or two.
Okay. It's in its absolute final stages and will be ready any minute now.
Okay.
But check back here for the new user manual, which it's been completely rewritten top to bottom and is very good. Okay, so back to user setup. As the primary user at your school, you'll come in and set up any other users, sort of the usual suspects. We've got a user ID. Again, typically that's first initial, last name. That has to be 6 characters. First name, last name, email address. Now, as you're creating someone else in your office, you'll need to assign them a security question. Hopefully you can pick up the phone and ask them where they went to high school or what their mother's maiden name was. You could also create something generic for them as long as you tell them, and don't send it in an email, because remember, it's supposed to be a second point of authentication outside of the email box. Now, and this is the most important part and the reason why we're asking you in your offices to do this. You can assign them roles. So let's say you had a user in your office who sat at the front desk and needed to be able to answer questions about whether a Need Access application was received, but you didn't want them to actually be able to make changes to it. You would pick Need Access Inquiry, which is a read-only functionality. And you can either click on or hold your mouse over these orange question marks to the right to tell you a little bit more about each role. So we have Need Access Inquiry, which is read-only, Need Access Support, which is full read-write access to all of the Need Access information, Registration Inquiry, which is a read-only view of registration, Registration Setup, which is full access to registration, and then the final one is the Setup button, which, if it's checked, allows a user full access to all of these setup items, including the ability to set up new users in your office. Once all of these roles are assigned and all of the information is filled in, you will need to click on this Add School button in the lower right-hand corner. It's not going to let me because I haven't populated all of the data. Let's make a very quick test user. Okay, and let's say I wanted this user to have full access to Need Access, but read-only to registration, but I did want them to be able to set everything up. Then I need to go into Add School, and you'll see it brings up a box and prompts me to save the information. And then I can pick from this drop-down list a university and assign the user to that university. If you don't do the step to assign them to a school, they'll kind of exist in limbo, and you'd have to give us a call to fix that for you. So this is where you would assign them. Now, the last piece of the setup is this contact type. At every school, there can be one primary and one secondary user, and those are the two users that Access Group would contact if we have any processing questions, concerns, issues, if anything major comes up. Not a contact is for anyone else in your office who needs access, but would not be someone we would contact, not one of the top two people in your office handling need access. Okay. Okay. Now, and adding the school is also the action that generates the email out to the user with their username and temporary password. Okay. Forging on ahead through our setup menu, we have the Flex Fields library, which we talked about. This allows us to manage, edit, delete, or add new Flex fields as needed. Calculation options will be gone over in a future training session in far greater detail, but you'll see here there are some options that allow you to modify parameters within the need access calculation. The calculation tables in the past had been only in the user manual, but we've included them here instead for easier access. And you'll see, as always, the calculation tables are what drive the calculation engine. Several of them are federal, are need access specific. Budgets and funds allow you to create, manage, and control how budgets and funds are assigned. Again, we'll talk about that in a future session. And then the export file layout is where you would go to create and manage custom file layouts or report layouts for exporting and reporting. Again, that will be in a future training session as well. And then the very last thing we wanted to touch on is the Help tab, which we talked about briefly already. Let me go ahead and reopen it. It always opens in a new window, so if you have any pop-up blockers, you'll need to turn that off. There it is. I already have it open. And the only item left on here that we haven't talked about is the data dictionary. Let's go ahead and open that up. Okay. Now, what the data dictionary does is it breaks down every field in the need analysis tab into its long name. So you can see here it has the name of each of the fields in case you needed to find them in the field picker and you weren't sure exactly what they were called. You'll see down at the bottom the tabs that we have here correspond on a 1-to-1 ratio with the tabs under the need analysis. So let me give you an example of that. If we go back into a student application and we go to the need analysis report page 2, you'll see we start out with general information used in computations, and if we go to the data dictionary, it mirrors it exactly. So let's say I wanted to include all of the fields from this need analysis report page 2 in a custom file layout or in a search, and I needed to know what they were called. That's where I would have to go to get them. Because remember, on the student section of the application, parent or non-custodial parent section, we have these question marks that allow you to click to find out what the field name is in case you needed it to search, or again, anytime you're using the field picker, you'll need the long name. But those couldn't fit into the need analysis report tab, so we've replaced that with the data dictionary for reference instead. Okay. Now, do we have any questions?
We don't have any general questions. Do you want to just ask if anybody has anything that they would like to go back over a little bit, because we have a little bit of time?
Yes. Yep. That's exactly what I was just thinking. We have about 20 minutes left, and that's everything I'd intended to cover to begin with. So does anyone have any questions about anything we covered previously, anything you'd like me to go into a little more detail on? And while you're typing those in to submit to Jim, remember to select panelists, and then Jim and Teresa will see those questions and we can address them. But while we're doing that, we did have a couple questions that were submitted prior to the session through the webinar registration. And I believe we touched on most of them: downloading applications, handling resubmissions, printing with limited success in our case on the demo database. One question we received was, has Need Access considered a forms upload functionality as part of the application process for taxes, W-2s, and similar pieces of information? That is something that we have been considering, and it's something that we would very much like to know more about how you would use it and who would use it. So if that's something that you think your school would use, if you could let us know, preferably by email, we can certainly take that into consideration, and it would help us plan for the future. The best way to submit those to us would be through our email address, which is nasupport@accessgroup.org. And again, it is something we've been strongly considering, and we would love more feedback from you on this.
I have a question from one of our participants asking, basically, if there's something that's a little bit, one of the more complex features that you've covered, and they would like a little bit of help with it, such as setting up their own private or their own custom export file, or exporting standard data, whatever. How can they get a little assistance with that?
And that's something that Teresa and I would be happy to help you with. We have another webinar session set up for next week, which gives me a chance to toot our own horns, which is Need Access customization, and we'll be talking about setting up budgets and funds, custom file exports. Three-quarters of the things that I said we wouldn't get to today will be covered in that session as well. So if that's something that you'd like, either we'd recommend attending that training session first, but if it's something you need sooner than that, we'd be happy to do a conference call, maybe even with a WebEx setup if you need a little more one-on-one attention.
One of the things you just mentioned that one of the things that is very handy with this, what we're using right now today, is WebEx. In case there are some people who haven't done this with us, is we can set up a private WebEx with one school, and you can have a couple of the people from your office participating. And one of the things that's nice that we can do is we can actually turn over the presentation to you, so that we're seeing what you're clicking on instead of the other way around. So that if you need a little help getting set up, or looking at your actual students and doing things in real time with your students, we can guide you through that and have a little private session with you, so that you can quickly get up to speed and get comfortable with all of this. And it's just either give Ann or who else?
Teresa.
Ann or Teresa Lawson a call, or send them a note.
And that's something that we can schedule in advance, or we can do them on the fly as needed. In most situations, it all depends on timing, but just let us know. And have we gotten any other questions? Okay. All right, great. It looks like there are no other questions. So I've listed our contact information here. As you think of things, as you get into the system, please let us know, and we look forward to helping you get your feet wet. So thank you so much for your time today, and have a wonderful afternoon.
We hope you like the new system as much as we do.
Absolutely. Thank you again, everyone. Bye.